There's no component of retail that lets you sit back and pat yourself on the back for what you accomplished yesterday. So it's a constantly moving environment. You have to be leaning forward the whole time. It's a lot easier to do something right the first time than it is to go back and correct it after the fact. That was after the third automated P&L I sent out was wrong. I had to keep retracting it. Retail was then, and I think still is, a meritocracy. You know, you sort of earn your promotions and accomplishments. And your dad asked me if I would move into the CFO role. And I said, I don't want to be a CFO again. I've been CFO my whole life. I don't want to do that again. It's a hard job. Your dad's like, what? What I meant was, yes. Coming up with this list of values and reinforcing it in the organization is super powerful. And I think it drives home this idea of what the culture is supposed to be.
You're a young retiree.
I'm a young retiree.
You just had a birthday yesterday, so happy
That's
birthday.
a true fact. Thank you very much.
Yep. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, you worked for Bealls for how many years?
I was 16 years.
16 years. And you've been on the board for just 3, right?
I think more than that. I think I was on the board about maybe a little more than a year before I left.
Okay.
I was on the board when we were both in what was Bealls Department Stores.
Right. Yeah.
There was a transitional period.
Yeah. So 4 years total.
Yeah.
For your board work, and you are the lead director of the Bealls Inc. board, which is pretty cool. So,
and chairman of the audit committee.
Chairman of the audit committee.
And serve on governance.
Yeah, awesome. Well, let's rewind it. Let's take it. That's who you are today. That's what you're doing today, and I'm super jealous of all the travel and all the being able to just sit there and judge the CEO as a director on the. I'm joking, but super jealous. But yeah, backing up, you started working at a very early age, right? You were, what were you, 15 or so?
I was 15, yes.
Yeah. What was that like?
It was, at the time, it didn't feel as great as it does in retrospect, but it was really important from a formative standpoint in terms of, making me who I am and creating that basis of, I guess you'd call it sort of non-conventional problem solving, but the ability to, overcome adversity and accomplish things in a challenging environment. So yeah, I was living on my own and working full time. I worked construction first, and then weaseled my way into the car business. That's a whole nother story, but a long one. But
you have to weasel your way into the car business?
I did.
Really?
And it was tricky trying to get my first job in automotive repair, but that's really what I wanted to do. And I was able to accomplish that and ended up working at a private shop, 2 different car dealerships. And then I got the opportunity to go to community college and got my GED, and I did that and got into the University of Virginia, McIntire School of Commerce through transfer, which was pretty unheard of at the time. I was very fortunate. I've had a lot of very fortunate breaks along the way, but I was very fortunate to be able to accomplish that. And then, went to UVA, graduated from the McIntire School of Commerce, and went into retail after I graduated.
Nice. And where'd you go? What was your first stop in retail?
So I went to the executive training program at May Department Stores Company, and I was telling the story recently, but May Department Stores was recruiting what they said were the best and the brightest. They were recruiting from all the best universities across the country, and they had recruited 50 kids, and I was one of them in this training program. And 14 months later, there were 2 of us left. So
wow,
that whole strategy of recruiting, you may want to recruit people who are actually going to stay. That would be a better idea. But I had, a little more life experience and durability. But
the others were bright enough to realize that retail is really challenging.
That's exactly what happened. Without question, I totally admit that. I was, listen, what happened was I went to work and I thought it was going to be like 5 o'clock. I'm going to go home. It's going to be great because, I've been in college all these years. I'm studying so hard. I'm working overnight, and it's going to be great. I can just leave my work at work. And I got to work and they're like, it's 10 o'clock at night before we're leaving. It was the worst thing ever. And after like 3 weeks, I wanted to find another job, but I didn't have time. So I just stuck with it for a little while. and ended up getting sort of promoted quickly, and I was very fortunate. It was a time when things were booming, and we got promoted quickly, and it was and I'll get to this too in the conversation hopefully later, but retail was then, and I think still is, a meritocracy. You sort of earn your promotions and accomplishments, and that was certainly the case in the mid '80s. And those of us who lasted, got promoted, got through a lot of stuff, and accomplished things. So those were good times.
Yeah, what were a couple of your early memorable experiences with senior leadership as a young guy?
Well, I had a different background than everyone else, and I think it gave me a big advantage in terms of perspective. I had overcome some obstacles that other people hadn't overcome. Everybody had followed more of a traditional path. So when something came up, I approached it differently usually, and hopefully in a better way, that just because of perspective. But I will tell you that I had a guy who was sort of a mentor to me, and I was moving, changing jobs, and there was the worst job in the company was budget manager, and he suggested that I go into that position, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And that I learned an important lesson in that process, where he explained to me that you're going to bring something different to it, and you should go into these jobs, and each one of the jobs you should do the best that you can. And I learned that lesson. I sort of took it to heart, but I really learned it in practice, and I killed it in that job. And I changed everything. The person who was in the job before me was working like 14-hour days, and after a couple of months, I got everything sort of automated and worked the job into a very desirable job. So the next person kind of wanted it at that point. So, I think that I had great mentorship, and some of it was direct and some of it was indirect. I remember the CFO told me that it's a lot easier to do something right the first time than it is to go back and correct it after the fact. That was after the third automated P&L I sent out was wrong. I had to keep retracting it. But I automated the process that used to be handwritten. It used to take them like 4 weeks to do the store P&Ls. And I did the whole thing in like a week and a half, which was great, except they were wrong. That was the only problem. But yeah, we worked that out after a couple of months.
Gotcha. You've told me some really fantastic stories over the years, and I was hoping to get one of those potentially when I asked that question, but some are shareable, some aren't maybe. But there was an airplane ride that you went on where there was some trouble up in the air with one of your.
I don't know if I want to repeat all these stories. I'll go that story. That's as far as I'm going on this whole thing. But we were on an airplane ride. There were 4 of us, and we were going to a store visit, and it was a small plane. And we were taking off out of Peachtree to Cab Airport, and the right engine hit birds, and we were 20 feet off the runway or something, and it was scary. And I was sitting directly across from the CEO, and there were 2 other guys. I think it was HR, and I can't remember the fourth. Oh, the store regional, and we were going to Indianapolis. This story is coming back to me. It's reminding me why I shouldn't tell it. But anyway.
Perfect.
Anyway, we get up, and the engine, dies out, and the plane drops on the right side. We just missed the trees at the end of the runway. And after all that, there's smoke coming into the cabin, because I guess that was not really smoke, but smell. That was the engine that provides, I guess, the air conditioning or whatever. I don't know. The engine spooled back up, and as soon as it was a Learjet, and as soon as the engine came back online, we went straight up. This thing was like crazy. And he circled around a little bit and then brought it back down on the ground. And when he landed, the pilot was like this old Air Force vet, retired, and just like brushing it off. He didn't care. And the co-pilot was this kid, and he was just jumping up and down and telling me about how it was just like when he was on the simulator last week, and he was like so excited
to be alive.
Yeah, and after you've been through one of these airplane incidents, you can't eat for like the next day. And so we get off the plane. They landed back, after whatever, and we get off the plane, and then I'm looking out the window, and they take the plane to the end of the runway, and you hear them go, whoop, whoop. rev it up a couple times. They go step ladder, flashlight, come back. You guys are good to go. So we were like, all right, we're back on. And we went to Indianapolis.
Nice.
It's not even the worst airplane story I got, but it was it was one of them.
Perfect. What else from your early career prior to Bealls is worth sharing before we get into the Bealls story?
I don't know. I think maybe some of it'll come up as I think of things, but I think my only point about the whole early piece is that it's formative. You know, it sort of changes who you are and changes your approach to how you go into things. Mm-hmm. And I think part of that is what made retail a good fit for me is, you know, the experiences that I had in life and the way you approach retail as a result of it and sort of what retail demands. So.
Yeah, it demands change. It demands like open-mindedness. It's
resilience.
Resilience, yeah, for sure. Passion, yeah. It's a challenging business for sure. It's not nearly as easy as podcasting.
I don't know if that's true or not,
yeah.
but
it's true.
It's definitely different, and it's a different career. But it's a very rewarding career because there's a tangible component that comes out of it that, when you talk to people who've been in retail a long time, kind of all share that. It's a passionate thing that you get this feedback loop. And that's the piece of retail that's so exciting, that you can see tangible results and you can make a difference. And as I said earlier, the meritocracy piece is critically important. I think for anybody who's going into a career, you want to go in a career where you're going to be appreciated for what you accomplish. On merit. You want to be promoted on merit. You want to accomplish and be rewarded on merit. And retail has always been that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a great business to be in. I love it. It keeps you constantly challenged. There's always something to do, something to overcome, something to change, to grow from, to learn from. But it's just different today. When I say it's difficult, it's different today than it was in the 90s, before the internet, before off-price took over, before boutiques, before, everybody had a pop-up website. So it's just, there's less competition though. And if you're going to be one of the ones that are strong enough to survive through that and to be able to, build your business and survive and be strong on the way out, then, you're sitting okay today. You're doing all right.
Yeah, I think that that's exactly correct. The landscape that exists in retail today is so different than it was. I mean, it was a super competitive business in the 80s and 90s, and the department stores were dying in the 80s and came back to life, and had the whole thing, this whole sort of life cycle process. But the internet changed everything, obviously. Everybody gets that. And 100% of all new retail shopping, if you just look at the math, is online. So now it's a knife fight between the people who have stores in terms of who gets that share of wallet. And that's hard, especially when people are building stores and the world is overstored and the United States of America is 5 times as overstored as the next closest country. So it's a lot of retail space for the competition, but you're absolutely right. The difference between winners and losers still looks the same as it always did. The winners succeed and the losers don't. Mm-hmm. So there's just a lot more losers.
Yeah, the Gen Pop might be 5 times more addicted to shopping here than they are in other places too, though.
There's no question about it. That's the reason that we have 5 times the retail square space per capita.
Were you thinking 10 years ago or 15 years ago that, and you thought about how Bealls would fare through all of the competition and through the bankruptcies of, all these department stores and through the rise of e-commerce and the rise, of just the changes that everybody's gone through? I mean, obviously you had confidence that Bealls was going to succeed and be where we are today. But what I mean, as you're working in the business as a leader through the business and talking to people and kind of, setting the path for the direction and everything, like what's really going on in your mind as 10 years ago, 15 years ago, as you see all of these headwinds and all of these challenges coming in, and you're the guy who's the president of the company and who's operating the company and guiding and leading through a very just uncertain time. What's that like?
Well, it's super rewarding because it's we always had a big advantage, and our advantage was that our leadership team was hands-on, and it's a family. The people who work here want to be here. Everybody loves Bealls, and when I say everybody, I mean customers, I mean suppliers, I mean people who work here, I mean shareholders. So there's nobody working against us. It's just a competitive environment. There's no, it's not internal backbiting or anything like that. So it's very different than a public company where the senior leadership is in a situation where they're really need to get short-term results, and they really need to paint a picture for a sort of an amorphous group of shareholders. In a private business, it's much more tangible. We're a hands-on team, and we're all working on a common objective, and we're trying to get somewhere. And what I always valued was change and progress and innovation. And we had a team that was able to bring that to bear at every turn. And I want to get into this at some point, but you were an important part of that team. And I want to talk about innovation. I'll talk about the sort of the Bealls progress piece of it. But to the question itself, I think that establishing goals that are aspirational and that are going to accomplish something that has a tangible, measurable result, and then driving towards that with a team that's motivated to do it is everything, and in pretty much any industry. And that was certainly the case here, and I'm sure the case at other successful retailers as well. I mean, you cannot sit still. There's no component of retail that lets you sit back and pat yourself on the back for what you accomplished yesterday. It just doesn't happen. So it's a constantly moving environment, and you know this better than anybody that you have to be leaning forward the whole time, and the team has to do that. It's not one person. It's obviously a team.
So what was it like then coming to Bealls when you first got here? What was the experience like? Who'd you meet, and what was the welcome like, and how did the culture kind of vary from your whatever you'd expected?
So so before I came to Bealls, I started with May Company, and then I moved to Federated. And at Federated, I became chief financial officer at age 30. I was recruited in as a chief financial officer of Riches in Atlanta, which was one of their very profitable divisions. Wasn't their biggest, but it was very profitable. And it was a plum job. And I spent 11 years there and was running operations by the time I left Riches as well. So all my experience to that point had been with big public companies. And I didn't really know what to expect from a private company. So after I left Riches, I went to work as a consultant, helping run a small technology company in Atlanta. I did that for about a year, and then went to LL Bean. And I was at LL Bean for about, a month. I was still commuting, and I got a call from a recruiter that said, "Hey, there's this job in Florida that you need to talk to them about." And I said, "Well, I've been here a month. I haven't moved. I'm still commuting. I haven't moved."
Is it Massachusetts? It's not Massachusetts.
It was in Maine.
Maine. Yeah.
It was in Freeport and Portland, Maine. So I was commuting from Atlanta to Maine every Friday morning. I flew to Atlanta, and every Sunday night I flew back to Maine. I ended up doing that for 5 months. But anyway, I did come down, and I talked to Steve, and I talked to your dad, and they offered me, Steve was being promoted, and they offered me his old job, which was President of Bealls Inc. And I said, I thought about it carefully, and I said, "Look, I'm 4 weeks into this thing at LLB, and I'm going to stay there. And thank you very much. I love you guys." And that was that. Except it wasn't that. So after I spent a year at LL Bean, and it was I worked very, very hard to make a difference and impact, and it was a very poor cultural fit. It just wasn't. It wasn't a good fit. So I called Steve, and he and your dad said, "Yeah, we'll make a place for you. Come here." So I didn't go looking for a job. I just came here, and I didn't know what job I was going to have very shortly before I got here, and it was chief operating officer of what was then the outlet business. And Paul Galizia was retiring, who was the president of that business. And Tien was the merchant at the time in that business. And when Paul retired, Tien and I were sort of co-leading the outlet, and that's what happened. And so that was my first job here.
I remember that.
Yeah. And you were already here. I think you were 2 years here by the time I got here.
Yep.
So, that's how I got in. It wasn't the original job, but it wasn't the job I was coming for. And that was really the point of that long-winded story, is that it was really the place to be. And I knew that coming in, and I had a really good sense of the culture, and, it was a good culture. However, I am super glad that I had the experience at LL Bean. LL Bean's a fantastic company. It's just culturally different, and it was an oddity to me, and I didn't understand it, having been nowhere but public companies. So having that 1 year in private was helpful. It did help me acclimate here faster.
What was the difference there with the culture? And it's a long time ago, so it's not as if you're disparaging or
oh, right. Yeah. I mean, they're very successful. I wouldn't disparage them ever.
Yeah.
I mean, even when I left, I didn't disparage them. I think it's a great company. It was not them, it was me. And that's for certain. I mean, they're very successful. But I think my expectations were very different, and the constituency to whom I appealed was very different from my experience. I've been very successful in, at a very senior position in a big organization by thinking my constituency was the people who needed to execute the plans and the people who worked there and the senior leadership team. And in a private company, in a family-owned company, that's maybe a bigger constituency than that. You may want to pay attention to the shareholders and that kind of thing, and not leave them behind. And I probably didn't do as good a job at that as I should have. And the company articulated a very great desire for change. So I made change, and their appetite and their articulated desire was a little different. So we changed a lot of things for the better in most cases.
There's a scene from the movie Casino where the boss of the mafia maybe he's not even the boss of the mafia, but he's installed by the mafia to operate this casino. And there's a family member that works within the casino, and it's like they've given him this job. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's just like a doofus, but they pay him because he's a family member, and he's there. And the guy that was installed to run the casino is like, this guy's an idiot. He's got to go. Like there's a problem here. And he's like, look, this is my casino. This kid's out of here.
Right.
And he ended up regretting that, decision. Like,
Right.
is there really nothing that this guy can do for us? Was kind of what the family was saying. But I've thought back to that, often. I wouldn't say often, but once every year or so, I'll think back to that movie and that scene of that movie, and it's like it's interesting because it makes you think of the dynamic that exists between family businesses versus public businesses.
Right.
And it's just a slightly different dynamic where, yes, there is a family involved, and you don't treat the family differently in terms of, a family member versus a regular employee. If anything, it's going to be a bit more of a challenging road for a family member than it will be for a non-family
Here,
member.
yes, that's true.
Yeah. But you can't just treat them like crap either,
Right.
You can't just like kick them around.
No, of course not. No. And here, listen, I think the Bealls, what we do here is smart. I mean, I think the idea of making sure the family member is qualified before they come in,
Right,
and they have their
right.
credentialed, and they have the ability to succeed at their job, so that they have credibility from a job standpoint, is super important. I mean, it would be a very different situation if you brought a family member and just plunked them into a senior job and said.
We've been very selective over the years, but we do have Generation 5 coming up, and there's a dozen or more people, and you might get a half dozen that want to work here. So it's going to be an interesting kind of dynamic. We don't have to dive into all that, but it's fun.
I love the dynamic.
It's a part of what makes family businesses unique and special, and just a great place to be. And I think when you get a cool family, and you get a family that is has a lot of gratitude and appreciation and respect, then you've got something that really, when we talk about Bealls being special, and everybody loves Bealls, I think that's a part of the reason why, because you've got family members who aren't, there's not expectation there. There's not, so.
It's absolutely the truth, and I've become oddly an expert at family business somehow or another, and I'm on another family board, and I've done some consulting with other families as well, and I love the dynamic. I mean, I think that that's sort of the key element of the whole thing is making all the business piece is the business piece, and making all that work is, I'm good at that. I can figure all that out. But the fun part is connecting it with the family piece and making sure that, everyone's aligned and that things are going in the right direction and you have people on board. And, I've learned that through experience, but it's also the rewarding part. I mean, it really is. Tying all those pieces together is the rewarding part. I would also say I agree with you completely that what makes the Bealls experience so much better than other family companies is there's no dissension. The company doesn't deal with the family; they deal with you. They deal with one or two family members, and those family members represent proxy. There's no, you don't have somebody coming from left field and saying, "Hey, I want something different than this person." There's consistency of message, and there's clarity of what we're trying to accomplish, and there's agreement on where we're going. So that's the key to this whole thing, and obviously the credibility piece is a big deal, and we have historically been really good at that here.
Well, cool. Yes. So you started off chief operating officer. I think you and Tian were essentially running the outlet at that point in time, right? Like a two-headed leadership kind of a thing.
Right. Don't do that again.
No, we're not going to do that again. I think we learned our lesson from that, actually. Yeah. I didn't do that, by the way. No, I'm sure it made sense at the time. But then that changed, and you what did you do next after that?
So yeah, that's good. Here's another tie-in. So you remember the story I told you about budget manager?
Yeah.
Well, your dad asked me to move into this CFO role. We had a little bit of a problem at CFO and some bank line issues and things of that nature. And your dad asked me if I would move into the CFO role. And Conrad had just moved over to the outlet, so the timing seemed perfect. And I said, I don't want to be a CFO again. I've been CFO my whole life. I don't want to do that again. It's a hard job. And your dad's like, what? It's like, what I meant was yes. But it's the best thing. I mean, I moved into the job at like the ideal time because it was literally months before the financial crisis. And I think like 6 months before, maybe something like that, before the head of it. And we were able to get, a lot of stuff cleaned up and straightened out and organized in such a way that we could get through the financial crisis without, it being existential. And that was, everyone loves a crisis in retail because you come out of it, so much stronger and learning so much. And no one loves it going in. The coming out part is what the people love. Is what I mean to say. But yeah, that was my next role is chief financial officer. And I was chief financial officer through that financial crisis. And then I took on all of the other corporate functions shortly thereafter. And then I became president of Bealls Inc. shortly after that.
Taking on the other corporate functions.
Yeah.
So human resources, loss prevention, IT,
and
logistics, distribution,
trash collection, whatever else there was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. So then, president of Bealls Inc.
Right.
So you finally got the job that you were
originally offered.
That's awesome. But so then, what was the presidential role like for you?
It was great. I mean, we had a fantastic team. I brought in a fair chunk of leadership, people that I'd known and worked with in the past. But we had a great team, and there was so much opportunity. I mean, we were doing such a great job with sort of old structure and old systems and old processes, and we were able to modernize a lot of that fairly quickly, especially IT. I mean, IT was unbelievably effective. given the investment. And it was, we had a really small sort of tiger team doing everything. But what was happening at the time is the world was changing, and you couldn't use, there was a point at which you couldn't use old technology anymore. Some of the safety and security issues were starting to raise their head, and our POS technology was sort of aging out. We had systems that were over 20 years old. So we had to kind of modernize that whole thing. And we had to put a management structure into the IT organization. We had to modernize the equipment. We had to modernize our systems. And we're still working on that, but it's going
every day. I was going to say that nothing's changed because every day
on that.
Something is expiring or going to end of life.
It's true. But we used to get a lot more value out of,
including leadership.
Yeah.
Just kidding. We're doing good.
I'm right here.
Yeah.
We got a lot more value back in the day out of stuff like equipment, because now it's obsolescence. They're forced it to be obsolete because of security patches and this and that. Software, same exact thing. But we ran those POS systems into the ground, and they were super durable, and they never went down. And the modern systems were PC-based, and we had to make the conversion into the PC-based systems. And those were less dependable, didn't last as long. It required all these, the whole thing.
A lot more expensive.
A lot more expensive. And they don't last 25 years like, the old thunk, 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 thunk.
Technology has come into business and just really extracted a lot of value from businesses over the last 20 years or so with these cloud fees, and they make you dependent upon what they offer, and then they extract as much as they can. And we just don't, it's almost like a leeching of the system of the, I just don't know where that. Everybody's got to raise their profits, including the technology companies. And if they raise their profits so much, then the people that they're extracting money from, how does that play out? It's kind of an interesting.
That's absolutely true, and compounded if you're a small company, and we're not. I don't know if we're a small company, but we're smaller than the multi-billion-dollar companies that are, the big hitters with Oracle and other companies like that, because the price of admission to most of the systems nowadays doesn't change based on your size. It's still the cost of admission, and so it's exactly problematic. The other great example of that is the idea of doing e-commerce. So when you're paying per click and Google search fees and word search and all that stuff, and you're paying a pay-per-click fee, it makes it almost impossible to operate in the e-commerce world profitably unless you're of enormous scale. And even then, I'm not sure I understand the mathematical model. I don't think Amazon makes any money in e-commerce still to this day, but anyway.
So we worked together for a long time. So I think moving past the 2010s, into the mid-teens, 2015, 2016, 2017, we were working more closely together in the neighborhood of that time period. What was that like for you? What are your memories of that?
So what happened, I won't get the chronology exactly right, but I'll get it sort of in order, correct?
Of who was doing what. And I guess I should even back up for a second and say we used to have a hierarchy where, if you want to call it that, where we had a president of Bealls Florida, we had a president of Bealls, we had a president of Bealls Inc.
Right.
And so each division, Bealls Outlet and Bealls department stores, had a president, which are now Bealls and Bealls Florida. And then we had a president for Bealls Inc., and then we had a CEO, and then there might have been a chief operating officer from time to time up there as well. And so now we're really at a structure of CEO, chairman, president of Bealls Inc., and the individual the individual business units no longer have a president. So it's much more, I feel like, connected and streamlined, and there's less layers of management, and of course less expenses, and quicker to get things done. And it seems to be, and of course the One Bealls thing has been fantastic to learn from each other and to connect and to unite and to kind of drive the business forward with one vision and coming together as opposed to competing. But I at least want to mention that before you dive into kind of the mid-teens, some of the time that we work together, just so that people understand what the structure of the company
No, that's a good preamble, and exactly right, too, spot on in terms of, well, we started at the beginning of that, but let me get to that. So I moved when I was president of Bealls Inc. After some time, Steve was CEO, and Steve had the outlet president reporting to him, and I had the Bealls stores president reporting to me. Bealls, which
formerly Bealls Department Stores,
exactly.
now Bealls Florida.
I don't even know what that.
You just call it Bealls Florida.
I'm in the third rendition.
Call it Bealls Florida.
Bealls Florida, reporting to me. So we had split the company, and that was the half that I had. And then sometime after that, we had come up with a strategy to involve you more directly in the Bealls Florida business, and those were fun times. You and I worked closely together, and it was my privilege to be able to mentor you and help you move more quickly through some of those roles and experience the whole change thing, which was significant. I mean, when we worked together in that business, and I should say that there was a transitional point where I took over that business directly as the president of that business and still had responsibility for half of Bealls Inc. So we kind of created this hybrid where we took one layer out, and it was one step towards the sort of the
one Bealls. Yeah.
Exactly. So we took one layer out. You and I worked together in that, and recognized, obviously, that there were plenty of challenges in the department store business and started to make change at it. And that was great fun. And you were tremendously successful and moved very quickly. So,
we did a lot. We made a lot of cool changes happen. And yeah, it was kind of hard to hold the reins back at that in those years.
It was a lot of innovation, and you were full of great ideas. And the funny thing is the river was flowing so quickly. We were moving sort of upstream on a retail environment that was so against the department store model that you could come up with 1,000 good ideas, and it was very hard to even stay in place, but not get washed down. And I think that's really kind of the analogy or metaphor, is that we improved that business.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it was a step towards kind of what you got to after the fact, which kind of getting everything together and merging and recognizing the fact COVID was a big accelerator as well, but recognizing the idea that the department store was really a dead duck and we couldn't wait it out. We had to do something differently.
Right. Yeah. So fully converted today, of course. And it's that the changes that happened with the department store, of course, you mentioned COVID accelerating it, but in addition to all of that, I mean, when you just think about the dynamic that exists within the state of Florida from a guest standpoint, a homeowner standpoint, a population standpoint, it's very different today post-COVID than it was 10 years ago, even, 5 years ago even, but with the retirees kind of being, it's no longer really a retiree state. I mean, you hate to,
Right.
It is to a degree, but not like it was. Like those retiree towns, those have been, a lot of retirees have been pushed out of the state due to expenses, costs rising, inflation, insurance, all the things, traffic. Nobody, the traffic is very difficult to drive in Florida, especially as a retiree. So yeah, it's a different dynamic today, and certainly the business model that we're going after today for Bealls Florida, being a coastal off-price, a la like a Nordstrom Rack kind of a thing, is certainly the way to go. But that has changed tremendously since COVID, just dramatically.
I think if this is my own supposition, it's been my observation and belief that the beginning of the demise of the whole department store world, in us too, is this change in media. So the high-low retailers really thrived on newspaper and this massive circulation. And with an older customer, they all received the newspaper. So you could say on Tuesday, hey, we're having a sale on Wednesday, and Friday you could say we're having a sale on Saturday. And these things were compelling, and people would go in and they would do that. But what happened was that newspaper circulation dropped off the face of the earth. Newspapers went out of business. The internet took over. Now people are consuming their media from multiple sources in many, many different ways. There's no way to advertise high-low anymore. So the model itself broke down really quickly. So did newspapers. I mean, now who get, I still get a newspaper, but it's a throwback, right? I mean, people don't, it's not a thing anymore. So you can't really use that as a vehicle, that whole ROP, run on press advertising process that we used to use in high-low. My whole career, I mean, that's what department stores did, kind of went away. And that was the beginning of the end. So once you lost the vehicle to do that high-low, ring a bell, come in, I'm going to tell you it's $100, I'm going to sell it to you for 75, nobody buys it at $100. That whole concept is gone. And what made a lot of sense to supplant it, which we saw during COVID, people said this hourglass effect, where we squeezed the middle out and everything went into the higher and the low end, and the low end at the time was off price. And off price is a brilliant concept. It's so much simpler. It's credible. It's easy to understand, and well, it's been booming. I mean, it's been booming. It's crazy.
It works, and in large part, it works because of the vendor community. They support it. They're getting big orders from the retailers that now have the biggest pins, like Ross and like TJX. And so it works for them, and so now they're cutting goods for retailers. They're
Right.
manufacturing goods directly for off-price retailers. And
It's almost comical.
yeah, it is. It's just a total shift. And of course, once they start doing that, once the vendor community starts charging department stores $15 for this shirt, and they're charging an off-pricer $4 for
Right.
this shirt, the exact same shirt. It's just a different account representative selling the department stores versus the off-pricers. Department stores are gone. They're done. They have no chance of survival after that.
And they're pulling trust me, the vendors are pulling the same margin, because their equation with the department store is so much more complex. It requires so much more back and forth, and has a back end, and you know how this whole thing works, and most of the viewers might not, so I won't get deeply into it. But the model for off-price is not just easier for the customer, it's easier for the merchant. It's easier for the vendor. It's an understandable model. It makes sense, and but it's super saturated, because originally the concept is that, as you articulated, they would cut merchandise for the department stores, and there would be some left over, and the off-pricers would buy that leftover stuff and sell it to you cheap.
Yep.
It'd be
I
the same
remember
stuff.
the constant question was always, well, are there going to be goods available this year?
Right.
Are we, is Bealls
Right.
Outlet at the time, are they going to be able to find enough to stock all of these new stores that we're opening? And it's like, the leaders were that was always a big family question,
Right.
that would come out, and the leaders were always, oh yeah, no problem. And it's like, how is it growing so much?
It's completely shifted.
Yeah.
Now the off-price is driving the
Yeah.
industry.
Right.
And department stores were also really long lead, right? Because technically it was fashion. You placed, you had to know what was going to happen. You had to know what color schemes were going to be. Off-price is a lot simpler from a manufacturing process too, because closer in.
Right. Yeah. So that's changed, and fortunately for us, I mean, you mentioned that it has impacted us. That change has impacted us, and by us, I think you meant Bealls, Florida, of course. So Bealls, I mean the whole company, but Bealls, Florida is now 20% of our business, and Bealls is 80% of our business. So that off price is really now 100% of our business, when you consider that Bealls is 80 and
Right.
Bealls, Florida is now off price as well. So kind of just, going to where things are today is just critical. You got to keep moving and get yourself placed in position to be successful with the reality of the world that we live in today. And that's, if you're doing that, and if you can even get out in front of it a little bit and imagine what the future might look like, then that's the kind of the fun part of retail when you get back to,
It's the dynamic piece of it. The rate of change, and I think you pointed this out a couple of times, is increasing. I mean, you mentioned a couple of times that things are different, but they're changing at an increasing rate. So every year things move faster. And what used to take us 10 years, well, technology is a great example. I mean,
Well, it's because of technology.
yeah,
I mean,
it's
technology is exponentially increasing, and so the rate of change at retail is exponentially increasing.
right. And technology used to be a tool that would follow the business, and now the
It's
business
leading.
follows the technology. So,
Right,
I mean,
right.
it's moving so quickly that it sort of drives the industry. But, and, as everyone I think well knows, that it's going to change things so fundamentally over the next whatever, pick a number, 10 years. It's
With AI.
absolutely it's almost impossible to predict. It'll be nonlinear in terms of how it changes the industry. But this circles back to an earlier point, is that those who are successful are those who are agile, because you'd be foolish to sit down and suggest that you can predict what the future is going to look like in this environment. Ridiculous. You can predict the future for, as far as you can see, but to try to predict it out 4 years or 7 years is crazy. What you have to be is agile, and that's the beauty of a small business, and that's the beauty of a retailer that's been tested through some of the challenges over the last generation or so.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually just talked to Ron Fries about this exact topic yesterday, and so yeah, we had an interesting conversation on it. And I guess it feels like if you're a leader who's just reacting to things that are changing, you're going to be okay, because that's what 98% of CEOs are doing in America right now. They're just reacting to the environment, and they're attempting to manage their business through it, and to grow it as much as they can and to be as successful as possible. But if you're like an Elon Musk or like a Steve Jobs, or like if you're if you can attempt to not know with certainty what the future looks like, but have some sort of a predictive model of, like, there's a 50% chance that people are going to be ordering AI, through this specific app, through either Amazon, or they're going to be talking to Grok, or they're going to be talking to, Shop app or whatever, then if you can kind of attempt to paint a picture for what the future might look like 8 years from now, 10 years from now, well, then all of a sudden it becomes less of a reactionary kind of, I'm going to put fires out over here, I'm going to grow over here, I'm going to, put more money into this, I'm going to invest in this. If you can really visualize what that future state looks like, well, then all of your direction, all of your investments, all of your energy, all of your resources is funded towards that future moment. It's like the moment that Steve Jobs decided, look, it's not going to be people typing on a BlackBerry with keys anymore. Like let's have the vision of this. It's people want a screen. They want the full screen impact. So I think thinking about AI and how AI is going to change the future of retail is, of course, what every CEO in America needs to be doing right now. The challenge is, nobody has a good picture of, like what shopping habits are going to look like in 10 years, or how it's going to impact not just retail and shopping, but the world in totality. Like, is it going to be, well, there's all these different options I feel like for what the future might look like with a fully integrated AI embedded into our tablets, our phones, our televisions, anywhere that technology exists. So, I mean, I guess just in terms of AI, do you have any like where do you think we're headed in the next maybe just like couple of years as it relates to because it's difficult to go past that, but what are the big nuggets that are going to be changing from an AI standpoint in your mind?
I believe that you are exactly right, that the person who can predict the future will be successful. And I think, going to where the ball is going to be is a really big deal. I would just make the point that is going to take a lot less time than it did in the past. So, this 10-year vision you don't need a 10-year vision. You could be way in front of the ball with a 4-year vision. And I really don't think there's any advantage to the longer view, because there's no way to know what it's going to look like. It's going to morph so many times between now and then. But I do think being in front of it instead of behind it is pretty important. And that's the hardest thing in the world today, because I don't know how you get in front of it. But it's a solid question, and it's what, as you say, everybody, not just retailers, but everybody's kind of wrestling with is what it's going to look like. And, at its core, it's either the best thing that's ever happened to humanity or the worst thing that's ever happened. Maybe somewhere in between, but probably one or the other. It's crazy. I mean, the potential is unbelievable. And from a shopping standpoint, my expectation is going to be that there's going to be a much more customized experience, machine-driven customized experience, where right now I click on something on Amazon, it's like, see this in your room. You're going to be able to see you in clothes on the simplest of apps in the world in short order. And then shortly after that, there's going to be a recommendation process where someone else is going to suggest, hey, this is what it looks like, and here are your 3 options. And, it's going to be a whole thing. It's going to cut out the middleman of you trying to make decisions. And that's what AI has done in a lot of areas, is that whole decision process gets shorter, and the drudgery of, hey, I got to figure out what I'm going to wear. I got to figure out which one of these things I'm going to buy. It's not just clothing. I mean, every product in the world is like that. You got a million choices. Which one should I buy? There's going to be some machine engine that's figuring that out for you, for better or worse. And some of it might be driven by who spends the most money to get your feed and to provide the feedback on what you should be buying. But it's definitely, everything I read, somebody says, oh, well, I had this job and all the drudgery parts of it, I don't really have to worry about anymore because, I just feed all that stuff into AI and it does this and does that. And I think that's going to be true with shopping. And I think the retail store, brick and mortar, if you will, is going to still play a really important role, because I still think that there's interest in and competition for the tangible idea of actually going out and touching stuff.
Right. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, you think back to like when the internet was first coming up, and kind of compare that time period to right now with AI kind of first coming up, and the disruption that I think everybody kind of knew was going to happen and was going to take place. Do you see this AI thing being more of a disruptor to retail and to life in general, about the same, or what are your thoughts?
I expect it to be profoundly more. But again, I can't paint a picture of exactly what that looks like. Based on what I know so far and what I've seen, it's quite shocking what the abilities are and what the extent of AI that already exists looks like. The AI that we have access to, there's a few companies that can afford to have real AI, and we have access to ChatGPT and some of the stuff that's basically free. And the stuff that's basically free is extraordinary. I mean, its reach is extraordinary. It's not perfect. I mean, there's still hallucinations and lots of crazy stuff going on. But what it does and what it returns and what it can do as far as jobs and just all the things that it could potentially disrupt is huge. And imagine what the engines look like that are not free. Somebody's working on some stuff that we don't have access to that may be very specific in terms of what it's trying to accomplish. Coordination of drones or something that it would be impossible for humans to coordinate 30,000 separate events doing 70 million things at once or whatever. AI, no problem. It's a piece of cake. So the implications for the military and for intelligence and surveillance and just anything that involves our lives is going to be profound.
Yeah.
It's going to be profound.
So by the military, you mean death of humans?
Yeah.
Pretty much. It's going to be interesting when robotics and AI begin to kind of mix more and mesh more, and we'll see that over the decades as time goes on, and just better and better, smarter robots that are doing more and more human activities. But right now, we're still on the very entry level of that.
But it's increasing at a logarithmic rate.
Really is crazy.
And that's the piece that the medical technology piece is going to be a game changer. That's going to get everyone's attention, because AI has already solved machine learning, if you will. I necessarily call it AI. It's already solved many things. Like there's gene folding, and there's all these things that required crazy calculations and interpolations that, you get enough engine power behind it, and you can figure some of that stuff out. And of course, if it's self-learning, so I think the medical technology piece, the finding effective treatments for disease and extending human life, and combining that with robotics and micro robotics, and just things that could potentially attack cancers very specifically. And I just think it's extraordinary what could happen. And I really think it'll be in the next generation. Our kids are going to live to see extraordinary change, unprecedented change in technology that is potentially super helpful to humankind.
So I keep attempting to get everybody within the organization to try to visualize it, like visualize. And we're decentralizing from technology this AI conversation and attempting to empower the leaders of every division to tell us how do they think that they should use AI? Like, how should AI be used within merchandising, within marketing, within planning and allocation, within like because those our leaders are closer to it than Karen Beebe sitting in technology, and Karen really needs to be able to visualize for us and help educate us about what is it going to look like what are the practical dynamics, and make it tangible. And that's the part that everybody is still struggling with. I think like prior to the internet coming about, it was difficult to envision how we were going to be using that in 5 or 10 years, and so the same thing is kind of true with AI. It's just making it tangible, making it visible is such a challenge. So that's kind of hopefully we can educate from the top down, and also provide software solutions and solutions from just a management standpoint on how we can become more efficient, recommendations on how individuals can use AI to become more efficient and to solve problems and to free up time for other things. But then you've got this whole bottoms up kind of approach as well that's happening within the organization now. That's like, well, I can use it to do this, and I can save this amount of time, and we can reinvest these dollars to do something else. So, yeah, it's a big conversation. It's a critical conversation. I know it's happening with every CEO and every board around America. So I figured we ought to at least chat about it. But it's probably enough on it.
I love that, though. I think the idea is to iterate, and you have to start somewhere to iterate. You're going to get smarter and smarter as the technology changes, and you can build on a concept. And the concept is that we had this idea and it's changed, and here's the direction that it's going. If you don't start with an idea, then it's very hard to build on it. So I like that very much. I think that's smart.
What has it been like serving on the board of directors as compared to being an actual, operating member of management?
It's very, very rewarding because, and I have a big advantage having worked here and worked with the team members and sort of understanding the basic issues. Of course, they've changed over 3 years, but understanding the basics of the business has, I think, given me more appreciation of it. But the board is fantastic. I think the best board we've had since I've been involved with the company, and super supportive and knowledgeable and capable and all of that stuff. So the experience has been super positive. I like very much hearing from the leaders of the business, and I like hearing about the pieces of unity. I don't know all of the details anymore. So just knowing that the team is focused on the same topics and is telling the same story across the board is super helpful. And I think the concept of oversight is very different than the concept of, running a business. And I'm trying to be super careful about that difference and be supportive from an oversight standpoint, and not step on the idea of, try this and do this, or that's not the board's role. So that transition is a positive one. It's been helpful to me, and it's been a good learning process, and I like it very much.
Good.
I really like the board work.
It's a good group of people. It's a good dynamic. There's a lot of good, just Yeah, just good people that just vibe well and just open communication on really important topics, but also get to the heart of things from a lot of different perspectives, and
Absolutely.
yeah.
And care about the business. I mean, there's a common theme in this, and that the motivation for any questions that come up is always the same. And, you can, if you're a board member or if you're a member of management, you can always count on the fact that it's coming from a good place. And so it does create a much more productive environment if you're not worried about combat
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. Yeah,
or confrontation.
right, right. What has been over the years? What has been the board's biggest, would you say, like contribution, or the board's biggest kind of change to direction, or what is? I mean, obviously, so our board is there for oversight. It's there to make sure that things are running smoothly. It's there to make sure that management is effective, that they know what they're doing, that they're not mismanaging the business. But occasionally, you'll get the board and they'll come up with a brilliant, kind of game changing idea. I hope I didn't catch you on the spot here, but I'm just curious from your perspective, what is maybe one of the bigger ways that the board has been able to actually help the company, either financially or otherwise, since you've been involved?
Well, I think since I've been involved with the company or the board,
Either
because
way.
I think we had significant participation from some financial experts during the financial crisis that I counted on, and that was very helpful to me. And I think that the idea of supporting you and hearing what you're saying and then pushing you in the directions that you are leaning into or not leaning into is sort of the value of the board. I mean, it's very much a tool for you, and the idea that it validates what it is that you're doing from a direction standpoint. So the value of the board is, hey, I mean, I think this is a great idea. I'm going to lean into it more heavily because I just had this conversation with the board, and they're gung ho on this piece of it. Or maybe I'll back off a little bit on this idea because I got nothing but
Right. They hated that.
friction.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no hate, but I think that's the real point, is that it's not there's no push shove. It's just sort of gradual. You're feeling the vibe, and it helps you validate something that you're already testing on them to begin with. So hopefully that's the value that you're getting from it.
For sure. Yeah. No, the board has been super valuable to me. Yeah. It's been great. Anytime imagine if you didn't have a boss,
Right.
like imagine if you didn't have a manager, somebody that you could bounce ideas off of, somebody that you could talk to about issues that you were having and,
Right.
situations that you were facing. Like if you didn't have that, it becomes different. I mean, you're just a one person show there. But when I've got 10 people that I know are experts in various fields that I can reach out to for support and guidance at any time. And, it's not like I've got people on speed dial or that's constantly needed, but over time, that's been something that's been valuable and important,
I think so. And I think the idea of having a discipline, so the quarterly meeting is a discipline, and it's a discipline for your senior team, and it's a discipline for you. And it allows you, I will tell you from my personal experience, I say you, but I mean you, the manager, the chance to gather thoughts and ideas and distill them into something to present to the board. And while you're doing that, lots of things come up. It actually improves the process because you have somebody to answer to, and it's sort of a ancillary benefit, if you will. But I think that discipline is valuable, and quarterly is a pretty good beat for that.
Yeah, it seems about right. Well, good. Well, what did we miss? What topics did you want to cover that we didn't cover?
I just want to reinforce the idea that the culture here is positive and unique. And this whole idea of values and this process that you've created through iteration of coming up with this list of values and reinforcing it in the organization is super powerful. And I think it drives home this idea of what the culture is supposed to be. I've been to a lot of these seminars where they have these great slides and they have these 4 ideas and these 3 pillars and these 7 thoughts and you're leaving, you're like, this stuff is great. But when you go back to work, you feel great for like 3 days. And that's different than what you're doing. You're taking these ideas and you're driving them home on a very regular and constant basis. And it really just weaves them right into the fabric of the organization. And to me, that's a game changer. And I'm feeling it when I hear from management, from a board perspective. The managers are talking this stuff. I mean, I think it's really working. And I give you really high marks for making that happen. So well done.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been a fun opportunity to attempt to create something new and to create, like, I mean, the culture's always been good here. It's always been really strong. So, like, it's a risk. You take a risk. Do we want to, take something that's really strong and make it stronger? Or, you've got the chance of, upsetting the apple cart or whatever kind of cliche, lame saying you want to attach to it. But, yeah, it's been fun. It's like the values, as opposed to me kind of, I'm not driving them. They're just a part of who I am now, and not every day. It's a practice. So it's not as if like this is my identity. It's just a practice. Like I practice acceptance. I practice compassion. I practice accountability. I practice, all 8 of the values. And so, and people, once they learn and understand what the values mean and how they work, they're practicing them too. They're like, I don't have to, I won't get into any of them now, but they're taking hold naturally. It's not a push. They would never be effective, and I think that's why in most companies that values are generally not effective, is because they're pushed by management. And you feel like you're in school again. You feel like you're in church or something, and it's like these things are being, placed onto me, and there's some expectation that I understand them and that I'm aware of them. No, there's no expectation here of that. There's no expectation of, but if you want to become more self-aware, then here are the tools that will allow you to do that. If you want to enhance your emotional intelligence, here are the tools that will allow you to do that. And slowly you start to see people taking the reins and being like, oh yeah, I'd like to learn that. I'd like to understand what that means more. I'd like to practice that. And so the values, once they're articulated, once people understand them, they're running with them. And so the values themselves are now taking hold throughout the organization, independent of what anybody else is doing. In fact, there's no posters, there's no coasters, there's no, there's not like, it's not ingrained into anything that we're doing. It's not like I got to check this box and talk about them at this meeting. It doesn't. They just come out naturally, And so it's really, I feel like the only way to enhance culture is at the individual level, where each individual is enhancing their true self, and it has to, and it's not. If it's not that individual that's choosing to do that, if it's being forced upon them, if it's some expectation, if it's some goal, if it's some activity, then it doesn't stick. It's not real. It doesn't work. And so when you have individuals that want to be more connected, that want to be more compassionate, that want to be more accepting, that don't want to judge as much, that want to be accountable for their mental state, that don't want to blame other people, that don't want to tell lies, that want to be transparent, that want to be empowering, that want to be open-minded. These are like just daily practices for daily living that just make sense regardless, of once you understand them, regardless of who you are. And so it's just, let's, and by enhancing our connection, our self-awareness, our emotional intelligence, we're creating a better culture without even doing anything, like by working on ourselves. I'm going to create less negativity every day I show up in the office if I'm practicing acceptance. If I'm not judging everything. You've got 3 options when life hits you with a situation, a scenario. You can judge it negative, you can judge it positive, or you can accept it and refuse judgment altogether. And so our value is, let's accept it. This is the reality. This is how things are. This is the nature of things right now. Down 20% in sales yesterday. Okay, well, we don't have to judge that as bad to change it. We can just accept that, hey, we were down 20 yesterday. Now, what do we do? Like, let's not focus our energy on resistance and on complaining and on negativity. Let's focus our energy on what we actually do to get, to get the result that we want to get, to meet our goals. So, yeah, they've been fun, and it's been life-changing, and it's been like this, I never would have thought. I talked about it on the CEO speech, when I first got promoted. I'm like, yeah, we're going to focus on emotional intelligence and self-awareness. I had no idea what I was talking about. Like, no idea what I was talking about. Like to see where it is today versus what I thought I knew back then is like mind blown. Like we're 200 years past what I thought we were going to be, 5 years ago when I talked about it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I could feel it. I mean, it's culturally different, and it's really positive. I think that's great. And I like the authenticity piece of it very much. It kind of weaves through everything, if you're not, you're going to lose that. So, yeah, I think that's fantastic. And I would say that I just want to circle back around to this retail thing and say that there are lots of good, if you're watching this and thinking about whether or not you want to go work for Bealls in the retail business, I would very much encourage people to go do it. You're talking about one of the last businesses that's legitimate meritocracy. How many great executives have we developed from entry-level positions? I mean, it's very common in this business. Promotion from within, very common in this business. You got a great culture, and you've got a business that's dynamic and changing every day. So I personally have had a great career in retail. I've been very, very fortunate along the way, and sort of had lots of junctures where I was just met with great fortune, and I'm thankful for that and grateful for all the things that have happened. I'm super grateful to you and your dad, and so grateful that I was able to retire from this company versus another one. It's a big deal, and it's a great place, and I'm so glad I'm able to stay connected with it.
Awesome. Well, good stuff, man. It's been fun to talk to you. I think we've gone a little longer than we typically do for a legacy, so not surprising given our history. I mean, we go back, a long time. So I appreciate you being here. Appreciate the contributions that you made to the company. Of course, while you were here actively managing, the company would not look like it does today if it wasn't for you and the improvements that you made across the company. But certainly from a financial standpoint was huge. But across the company, everywhere, the leadership, like you mentioned, the mentorship for me, I know personally has helped me tremendously. So I thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I thank you for the awesome job that you do on the board for us as well. So
thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
That's an absolute pleasure and honor.
Yep. Awesome.
So thank you.
Awesome. Well, very good, man. It's been a lot of fun. It's been great to connect with you. And,
you too.
I'll see you at the next board meeting, and maybe we'll get you back on here in a year or so and reconnect and see how you're doing.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Good, for sure. Awesome. Good stuff.